The Lost Jews. Part 2. I subtitled Part 2 of this study as the 400 Years of Slavery Punishment. Before we continue, it's important to have a summary of Part 1 of this topic, which is called the identity theft, so that Part 2 can be properly understood. From Part 1, we learned that Israel and the Middle East were originally part of Africa. We also learned that Adam means red, as in the color of red clay from which he was formed. The skin color of Adam was the color of clay, which was red clay or brown. We also learned that God's skin color is like the color of jasper and ruby stones, which are identical colors with the clay, and was also Adam's skin color. We learned that Noah was the first albino, and that he had 3 sons, namely Japheth, Shem and Ham. The modern identities of the 3 descendants of Noah are as follows. The Japhetic people are Caucasian or white people who are classified as Europeans and Asians. The Shemites, or Semitic people, are the Israelites and the Jews, who have light brown skin. The Hamitic people are Africans, with dark brown skin. We learned that Jesus had bronze or brownish skin when he was on earth. Jesus inherited Shem's skin color, the bloodline which he came from. The Lost Jews Part 2 begins. Genesis 15 stated that, as the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, Know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. Genesis 15:12-14. After God established his covenant with Abraham, he visited him and told him that his descendants would be slaves for 400 years in a foreign nation. Below are the characteristics of these prophecies. Abraham's descendants would be slaves in a country not their own. Abraham's descendants would be slaves for 400 years. God will punish the country that will enslave the Israelites, and Israel would come out of slavery with great possession. Many Christians believe that these prophecies were fulfilled by the ancient Israelites when Joseph, his father, Jacob, and their entire family lived in Egypt, and they use Acts chapter 7 to support their claim, but this is not entirely accurate. Some people believe that these prophecies were fulfilled in Egypt because of Stephen's comment to the Pharisees before he was put to death. Let's examine Stephen's statement critically. Acts chapter 7 stated that, Then the high priest asked Stephen, Are these charges true? To this he replied, Brothers and fathers, listen to me. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham while he was still in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran. Leave your country and your people, God said, and go to the land I will show you. So, he left the land of the Chaldeans and settled in Haran. After the death of his father, God sent him to this land where you are now living. He gave him no inheritance here, not even enough ground to set his foot on. But God promised him that he and his descendants after him would possess the land, even though at that time Abraham had no child. God spoke to him in this way, For 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, God said, and afterward they will come out of that country and worship me in this place. Then he gave Abraham the covenant of circumcision. And Abraham became the father of Isaac and circumcised him 8 days after his birth. Later Isaac became the father of Jacob, and Jacob became the father of the 12 patriarchs. Because the patriarchs were jealous of Joseph, they sold him as a slave into Egypt. But God was with him and rescued him from all his troubles. He gave Joseph wisdom and enabled him to gain the goodwill of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So, Pharaoh made him ruler over Egypt and all his palace. Then a famine struck all Egypt and Canaan, bringing great suffering, and our ancestors could not find food. When Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, he sent our forefathers on their first visit. On their second visit, Joseph told his brothers who he was, and Pharaoh learned about Joseph's family. After this, Joseph sent for his father Jacob and his whole family, 75 in all. Then Jacob went down to Egypt, where he and our ancestors died. Their bodies were brought back to Shechem and placed in the tomb that Abraham had bought from the sons of Hamor at Shechem for a certain sum of money. As the time drew near for God to fulfill his promise to Abraham, the number of our people in Egypt had greatly increased. Then a new king, to whom Joseph meant nothing, came to power in Egypt. He dealt treacherously with our people and oppressed our ancestors by forcing them to throw out the newborn babies so that they would die. At that time Moses was born, and he was no ordinary child. For 3 months he was cared for by his family. When he was placed outside, Pharaoh's daughter took him and brought him up as her own son. Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action. When Moses was 40 years old, he decided to visit his own people, the Israelites. He saw one of them being mistreated by an Egyptian, so he went to his defense and avenged him by killing the Egyptian. Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them, but they did not. The next day Moses came upon 2 Israelites who were fighting. He tried to reconcile them by saying, "Men, you are brothers. Why do you want to hurt each other?" But the man who was mistreating the other pushed Moses aside and said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" When Moses heard this, he fled to Midian, where he settled as a foreigner and had 2 sons. After 40 years had passed, an angel appeared to Moses in the flames of a burning bush in the desert near Mount Sinai. When he saw this, he was amazed at the sight. As he went over to get a closer look, he heard the Lord say, "I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob." Moses trembled with fear and did not dare to look. Then the Lord said to him, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. I have indeed seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard the groaning and have come down to set them free. Now come, I will send you back to Egypt." This is the same Moses they had rejected with the words, "Who made you ruler and judge?" He was sent to be their ruler and deliverer by God himself, through the angel who appeared to him in the bush. He led them out of Egypt and performed wonders and signs in Egypt, at the Red Sea and for 40 years in the wilderness. This is the Moses who told the Israelites, "God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your own people." He was in the assembly in the wilderness, with the angel who spoke to him on Mount Sinai, and with our ancestors, and he received living words to pass on to us. But our ancestors refused to obey him. Instead, they rejected him and, in their hearts, turned back to Egypt. They told Aaron, "Make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who led us out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." That was the time they made an idol in the form of a calf. They brought sacrifices to it and reveled in what their own hands had made. But God turned away from them and gave them over to the worship of the sun, moon and stars. This agrees with what is written in the book of the prophets. "Did you bring me sacrifices and offerings 40 years in the wilderness, people of Israel? You have taken up the tabernacle of Molech and the star of your god Rephan, the idols you made to worship. Therefore, I will send you into exile beyond Babylon." Our ancestors had the tabernacle of the covenant law with them in the wilderness. It had been made as God directed Moses, according to the pattern he had seen. After receiving the tabernacle, our ancestors under Joshua brought it with them when they took the land from the nations God drove out before them. It remained in the land until the time of David, who enjoyed God's favor and asked that he might provide a dwelling place for the God of Jacob. But it was Solomon who built a house for him. However, the Most High does not live in houses made by human hands. As the prophet says, "Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. What kind of house will you build for me? Says the Lord. Or where will my resting place be? Has not my hand made all these things? You stiff-necked people, your hearts and ears are still uncircumcised. You are just like your ancestors. You always resist the Holy Spirit. Was there ever a prophet your ancestors did not persecute? They even killed those who predicted the coming of the righteous one. And now you have betrayed and murdered him, you who have received the law that was given through angels but have not obeyed it. Acts 7, 1-60. The above was Stephen's conversation with the Pharisees before he was stoned to death, and nothing he said here had anything to do with the fulfillment of the 400 years prophecy. He only mentioned that God told Abraham the prophecy. If we pay attention to everything Stephen said from verses 1 to 53, we will realize that he only described all historical events and disobediences of the ancient Israelites, beginning with God appearing to Abraham and commanding him to leave his father's house, and promising him the promised land and to the death of Jesus. Let's examine Acts chapter 6 to understand what caused Stephen's outburst against the Pharisees. Acts chapter 6 stated that, "So the word of God spread. The number of disciples in Jerusalem increased rapidly, and a large number of priests became obedient to the faith." Now Stephen, a man full of God's grace and power, performed great wonders and signs among the people. Opposition arose, however, from members of the synagogue of the freedmen, as it was called, Jews of Cyrene and Alexandria as well as the provinces of Cilicia and Asia, who began to argue with Stephen. But they could not stand up against the wisdom the Spirit gave him as he spoke. Then they secretly persuaded some men to say, "We have heard Stephen speak blasphemous words against Moses and against God." So, they stirred up the people and the elders and the teachers of the law. They seized Stephen and brought him before the Sanhedrin. They produced false witnesses, who testified, "This fellow never stops speaking against this holy place and against the law. For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and change the customs Moses handed down to us." All who were sitting in the Sanhedrin looked intently at Stephen, and they saw that his face was like the face of an angel. Acts 6, 1-15. Why did the Pharisees arrest and kill Stephen? Stephen's anger and criticism of the Pharisees arose from the fact that they kept on practicing Jewish temple ceremonies after the death and resurrection of Jesus. After the events of the Pentecost, many people abandoned Judaism and converted to Christianity, including a significant number of priests. Let's examine the key phrases from the above verses. In those days when the number of disciples was increasing. So, the word of God spread. The number of disciples in Jerusalem increased rapidly, and a large number of priests became obedient to the faith. Opposition arose, however, from members of the synagogue of the freedmen, as it was called, Jews of Cyrene and Alexandria as well as the provinces of Cilicia and Asia, who began to argue with Stephen. Then they secretly persuaded some men to say, "We have heard Stephen speak blasphemous words against Moses and against God." They produced false witnesses, who testified, "This fellow never stops speaking against this holy place and against the law. For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and change the customs Moses handed down to us." The early Christians were killed primarily because they converted from Judaism to Christianity, which meant rejecting the temple worship, making animal sacrifices and ceremonial laws. Stephen and the other apostles spoke out against the temple and its laws because Calvary had replaced it, but the Pharisees refused to accept this truth, so they killed everyone who spoke against the temple or rejected Judaism in order to convert to Christianity. When Stephen was arrested and brought before the Pharisees to defend himself against the allegations that he spoke about the Jewish temple and its ceremonial laws, he recounted how Joseph was sold and taken to Egypt, how Jacob and his family went to Egypt, the killing of the Israelites' children, the calling of Moses, the establishment of the tabernacle, the takeover of the promised land, the building of the Jewish temple, the Messiah's prophecies, the killing of the prophets, and the Israelite and Jewish people's rebellion and condemning of the Pharisees. The 400 years prophecy described 4 separate prophetic events, but Stephen didn't mention any of them during his outburst with the Pharisees. The prophecies are as follows. Abraham's descendants would be slave in a country not their own. They would be slave for 400 years. God will punish the country that will enslave the Israelites. After that, Israel would come out of slavery with great possession. Let's test the accuracy of the prophecies and to see if they were fulfilled in Egypt. Abraham's descendants would be slave in a country not their own. The Israelites went into Egypt at separate times and by their own free will. They were not taken as slaves. The mistreatment by the hands of the Egyptians began after the death of all the patriarchs. B. They would be slave for 400 years. The book of Exodus stated that, now the length of time the Israelite people lived in Egypt was 430 years. Exodus 12:40. The Israelites lived in Egypt for a total of 430 years, but they were mistreated for 215 years. C. God will punish the country that will enslave the Israelites. God punished Egypt and Pharaoh with 10 plagues, and many of Egyptian soldiers drowned in the Red Sea. D. After that, Israel would come out of slavery with great possession. God delivered the Israelites from the Egyptians, but they didn't come out with any possessions. Apart from the families of Moses, Aaron, Joshua, Caleb, and a few others, most of the Israelites who came out of Egypt didn't enter the promised land because they sinned by creating and worshipped the golden calf. As punishment for their sins, most of them died while wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. So, we see that the prophecies God gave Abraham regarding his descendants were not fulfilled when God delivered them from Egypt. If these prophecies were not fulfilled in Egypt or elsewhere in the Bible, it means that they would be fulfilled somewhere else. Deuteronomy 28 revealed that the Israelites would be driven from the promised land, scattered abroad, and go into slavery if they disobeyed God. In Deuteronomy chapter 28, Moses assembled the entire tribes of Israel and informed them of the conditions for God's blessings and punishments if they disobeyed him. The consequences for Israel's disobedience would be as follows. However, if you do not obey the Lord your God and do not carefully follow all his commands and decrees I am giving you today, all these curses will come on you and overtake you. You will be cursed in the city and cursed in the country. The Lord will send on you curses, confusion and rebuke in everything you put your hand to, until you are destroyed and come to sudden ruin because of the evil you have done in forsaking him. You will become a thing of horror to all the kingdoms on earth. The Lord will afflict you with madness, blindness and confusion of mind. You will be pledged to be married to a woman, but another will take her and rape her. You will build a house, but you will not live in it. You will plant a vineyard, but you will not even begin to enjoy its fruit. A people that you do not know will eat what your land and labor produce, and you will have nothing but cruel oppression all your days. The sights you see will drive you mad. The Lord will drive you and the king you set over you to a nation unknown to you or your ancestors. There you will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone. You will become a thing of horror, a byword and an object of ridicule among all the peoples where the Lord will drive you. The foreigners who reside among you will rise above you higher and higher, but you will sink lower and lower. They will lend to you, but you will not lend to them. They will be the head, but you will be the tail. All these curses will come on you. They will pursue you and overtake you until you are destroyed, because you did not obey the Lord your God and observe the commands and decrees he gave you. They will be a sign and a wonder to you and your descendants forever. Because you did not serve the Lord your God joyfully and gladly in the time of prosperity, therefore in hunger and thirst, in nakedness and dire poverty, you will serve the enemies the Lord sends against you. He will put an iron yoke on your neck until he has destroyed you. The Lord will bring a nation against you from far away, from the ends of the earth, Like an eagle swooping down, a nation whose language you will not understand, a fierce-looking nation without respect for the old or pity for the young. Just as it pleased the Lord to make you prosper and increase you in number, so it will please him to ruin and destroy you. You will be uprooted from the land you are entering to possess. Then the Lord will scatter you among all nations, from one end of the earth to the other. There you will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone, which neither you nor your ancestors have known. Among those nations you will find no repose, no resting place for the sole of your foot. There the Lord will give you an anxious mind, eyes weary with longing, and a despairing heart. You will live in constant suspense, filled with dread both night and day, never sure of your life. In the morning you will say, if only it were evening. And in the evening, if only it were morning, because of the terror that will fill your hearts and the sights that your eyes will see. The Lord will send you back in ships to Egypt on a journey I said you should never make again. There you will offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you. The prophecies stated that all these curses will come on you. They will pursue you and overtake you until you are destroyed. And these curses will be a sign and a wonder to you and your descendants forever. The prophecies stated that these curses will be a sign upon the Israelites and the descendants forever. Although these curses are degrading, but they serve as a means of identifying the true Israelites and Jews wherever they are today. Forever means for eternity. This simply means that these curses would continue to affect anybody who came from the bloodline of the Israelites and the Jews, regardless of where they are today. Revelation chapter 2 and 3 stated the following. I know your afflictions and your poverty, yet you are rich. I know about the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not but are a synagogue of Satan. Revelation 2:9. I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews though they are not, but are liars, I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. Revelation 3:9. According to the verses above, Jesus warned us that a group of people will attempt to steal the identity of the Jews by claiming to be Jews. This also implies that any group of people claiming to be the lost Israelites and lost Jews without the signs listed in Deuteronomy 28 are fake or counterfeit Israelites and Jews, and they are not God's chosen people. Israel is divided into two separate nations. As explained earlier, Israelites and Jews are not the same. They're related but they are not the same. Israel is a surname or umbrella name for Jacob's 12 sons, which reigned as two separate nations. According to the Bible, King Solomon's 1,000 wives and concubines led him astray from God and introduced him to idolatry. 1 King 11:3-4. As a result of this, God said to Solomon, since this is your attitude and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away and give it to one of your subordinates. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him but will give one tribe for the sake of David my servant and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. 1 King 11:13. After Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam succeeded him. Rehoboam placed a heavy tax burden on the Israelites, and they rebelled against his governance. To address the issue, the elders of Israel pleaded with Rehoboam to reduce the tax in exchange for their loyalty, but he refused. As a result, God sent prophet Abiah to deliver his judgment against Israel. 1 King chapter 11 stated that, and Abiah caught the new garment that he was wearing and tore it into 12 pieces. See, I am going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes, but for the sake of my servant David and the city of Jerusalem which I have chosen out of all tribes of Israel, he shall have one tribe. 1 King 11:30-33. Israel was divided into two countries, with one tribe remaining to fulfill God's promise to David. God said, however, as for you, Jeroboam, I will take you, and you will rule over all that your heart desires. you will be king over Israel. God inspired prophet Abiah to make Jeroboam, from the tribe of Ephraim, as king of the nation of Israel. The Bible stated that Israel then declared, what portions have we in David? So Israel departed. 1 King 12:16. 10 tribes were separated from the ancient Israel, and Jeroboam of the tribe of Ephraim was declared as their king. God allowed the 10 tribes to keep the name Israel. Genesis 48:16 stated that Jacob adopted the sons of Joseph as his own and said, "Let my name, Israel, be named on them, Ephraim and Manasseh." From the map, we could see that Joseph was removed from the inheritance list because his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, replaced him. Levi had a spiritual responsibility under God to lead Israel as a people. Though the Levites lived among his brothers, but no inheritance was apportioned to them because God is their inheritance. We can also see that no inheritance was apportioned to Levi. The kingdom of Israel was referred to as the Israelites. The nation of Israel consisted of 10 tribes, which are Reuben, Simeon, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Issachar, Ephraim, and Manasseh. The nation of Judah was made up of the tribes of Judah, Levi, and Benjamin, and they were also known as the Jews. God's covenant with Abraham is divided between these 2 nations: the nation of Israel and the nation of Judah. Samaria became the capital of Israel, and houses of Ephraim and Manasseh were the leading tribes. Jerusalem became the capital of the nation of Judah, and the tribes of Judah were anointed to produce the kings, while the Levites would produce the priests. From that point on, the nations of Israel and Judah never reunited as a people again. Regarding the sins of the nation of Israel, the Bible stated that, "And this thing became a sin. The people walked as far as Dan to worship before one of the calves." Jeroboam built shrines on high places and appointed priests from all sorts of people, even though they were not Levites. 1 Kings 12:30-31. King Jeroboam was worse than his predecessors. He completely disobeyed God and led Israel to worship other gods. King Jeroboam built temples and appointed non-Levites as priests for Israel. The Bible stated that the Levites even abandoned their pasturelands and property and came to Judah and Jerusalem, because Jeroboam and his sons had rejected them as priests of the Lord. 2 Chronicles 11:14. The Levites refused to be a part of Israel's abominable behavior, so they had to abandon their properties and lands and return to Jerusalem, in Judah. Israel never repented from her idolatry, so God sent prophet Abiah to Jeroboam to deliver the following verdict. The Bible stated that, "But you have done more evil than those who lived before you. You have made for yourself other gods, idols made by metals. You have aroused my anger and turned your back on me." 1 Kings 14:9. The Bible also stated that, "And the Lord will strike Israel so that it will be like a reed swaying in the water. He will uproot Israel from this good land that he gave to their ancestors and scatter them beyond the Euphrates River, because they aroused the Lord's anger by making Asherah poles. And he will give Israel up because of the sins of Jeroboam has committed and caused Israel to sin." 1 King 14:15-16. Israel's punishment for disobedience would be expulsion from the promised land. Israel will be expelled to foreign nations across the Euphrates River. God's anger was fulfilled against Israel in the days of King of Assyria. 2 Kings 17 stated that, "In the 9th year of Hoshea the king of Assyria, King Sargon II took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria, and placed them in Ahala and in Haba by the ruler Gazan and in the cities of Medes." 2 Kings 17:6. The 10 tribes of Israel were scattered among modern-day Syria, Iran, and Turkey, and they never returned to the land of Israel till this day. The prophecy against Israel stated that, God will uproot Israel from this good land, and scatter them beyond the Euphrates River. The green line on the map is the Euphrates River. The modern names of the countries beyond the Euphrates River are Turkey, Iraq, Iran and shares bother with Syria. Just as the prophecy stated, Israel was expelled from the Promised Land and carried to nations beyond the Euphrates River. The Bible said, "Therefore, the Lord was angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight." The phrase, "removed them out of his sight," implied the scattering of the nation of Israel from the Promised Land. God said, "I will scatter them, Israel, into corners. I would make the remembrance of them to cease from among men." Deuteronomy 32:26. The nation of Israel will never return to the Promised Land as a people. God said, "I would make the remembrance of them to cease from among men." This statement implied that the world would forget about Israel as a nation and people. Let's look at the prophecy of Deuteronomy 32:26 once again. God said, "I will scatter them, the Israelites and the Jews, into corners. I would make the remembrance of them to cease from among men." Deuteronomy 32:26. There are two parts to this prophecy. We recall that the 12 tribes, which later became nations of Israel and Judah, were together as a single nation when the prophecies were made against them. The scattering of the Israelites was the fulfillment of one part. The scattering of the nation of Judah would fulfill the second part. 2 Kings chapter 17 stated that, "Therefore, the Lord was angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only." 2 Kings 17:18. According to the above verse, only the nation of Judah, the tribes of Levi, Judah, and Benjamin remained in the promised land of Israel. God allowed the nation of Judah to remain in the promised land because they continued to be obedient to his commandments. The captivity of the nation of Judah. Jeremiah chapter 25 stated that, "I will summon all the peoples of the north and my servant Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon, declares the Lord. And I will bring them against this land and its inhabitants and against all the surrounding nations. I will completely destroy them and make them an object of horror and scorn, and an everlasting ruin. This whole country will become a desolate wasteland, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Jeremiah 25:9-11. After a while, the Jews, the nation of Judah, began to adopt the customs of neighboring pagan nations. God allowed King Nebuchadnezzar to conquer and take Judah into captivity in Babylon for 70 years as punishment for their rebellion and sins. Analyzing the 400 years slavery prophecies. Genesis 15 stated that, "Then the Lord said to him, Know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there." The Jews' ultimate sin occurred when they rejected Jesus and handed him over to the Romans to be humiliated and killed. The parable of the tenants in Matthew 21 revealed who was directly responsible for the death of Jesus. Jesus said, "There was a landowner who planted a vineyard. He put a wall around it, dug a winepress in it, and built a watchtower. Then he rented the vineyard to some farmers and moved to another place. When the harvest time approached, he sent his servants to the tenants to collect his fruit. The tenants seized his servants. They beat one, killed another, and stoned a third. Then he sent other servants to them, more than the first time, and the tenants treated them the same way. Last of all, he sent his son to them. They will respect my son, he said. But when the tenants saw the son, they said to each other, This is the heir. Come, let's kill him and take his inheritance. So, they took him and threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. Therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those tenants?" When the chief priests and the Pharisees heard Jesus' parables, they knew he was talking about them. Matthew 21:37-45. As explained earlier, not everyone who is referred to as a Jew is born Jewish. Some people are referred to as Jews because they converted to the Jewish religion. The Pharisees are not Jews by birth. They are Edomites, descendants of Esau, the brother of Jacob, and they were referred to as Jews because they converted to Judaism and lived among the bloodline Jews. The tenants mentioned in the parable of tenants are the Pharisees, and they conspired to kill Jesus. Jesus said to the Pharisees, "You snakes! You brood of vipers! How will you escape being condemned to hell? Therefore, I am sending you prophets and sages and teachers. Some of them you will kill and crucify. Others you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town. Answer, upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Truly I tell you, all this will come on this generation." Matthew 23:34-6. In this passage, Jesus held the Pharisees accountable for all of Israel's prophets' deaths and maltreatment. This is a discussion for another day. I have a special topic for the descendants of Esau and the Pharisees. The bloodline Jews did not kill Jesus, but they ignorantly participated in his death. Deuteronomy 28 stated that, "The Lord will send on you curses, confusion and rebuke in everything you put your hand to, until you are destroyed and come to sudden ruin because of the evil you have done in forsaking him." The key phrase is, "You, Israel, will come to sudden ruin because of the evil you have done in forsaking him," as in God. What evil did the Jews commit against God, and how did they forsake or abandon him? When the Pharisees brought Jesus to Pilate to be killed, he knew Jesus was innocent of all accusations. That was why he washed his hands as a sign of his innocence when Jesus was sentenced to death. The Pilate tried to save Jesus by following the Roman tradition of releasing one prisoner on the day of Passover. After witnessing great miracles done by Jesus, Pilate expected the Jews to naturally choose Jesus over Barnabas, but they did not. The Jews chose Barnabas, a notorious zealot and a freedom fighter, over Jesus. The prophecy stated that, "You, Israel, will come to sudden ruin because of the evil you have done in forsaking him, God." The evil the Jews committed against God was that they deserted or abandoned Jesus when it mattered most. The Jews did not protest, or fight, or tried to defend Jesus in the same way that they did when the Romans arrested Barnabas and other zealots. The Jewish people's ultimate sin was that they abandoned Jesus and rejected his Calvary work and therefore rejected God. The Romans killed Jesus, but it was the Pharisees who handed him over to them so that they can carry out their agenda. Daniel's prophecy of 70 weeks prophesied Jesus' death, the destruction of the second Jewish temple, and the scattering of the Jews abroad. Daniel chapter 9 stated that, "The Messiah will be cut off but not for himself, and the prince of the people will destroy the temple, and its end will be like a flood." This prophecy has two parts. 1. The Messiah will be cut off but not for himself. 2. The prince of the people will destroy the temple, and its end will be like a flood. What does the above phrases mean? The prophecy stated that, "The Messiah will be cut off but not for himself." Jesus is the Messiah that was cut off, and the cut-off was in reference to his death. The phrase, "but not for himself," is in reference to the fact that Jesus did not receive any reward after his death. Jesus returned to heaven to start his work as high priest and making atonement for sin. Jesus will get his reward when he returns to earth for the second time and rule the world as king forever. The prophecy stated that, "The prince of the people will destroy the temple, and its end will be like a flood." The prince of the people refers to Caesar of the Roman Empire. It's important to mention that Jesus also prophesied about the destruction of the second Jewish temple. The Bible stated that, Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. "Do you see all these things?" he asked. "Truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down." Matthew 24, 1-2. This prophecy was fulfilled when Caesar issued a decree against the Jews and their second Jewish temple in 70 AD. The Gospel of Nicodemus chapter 20 gave us insight into the incident that led to this decree. The book of Nicodemus chapter 20 stated that, "And Caesar asked the Pilate, For what cause then didst thou perpetrate against him, Jesus, such daring and doing, not being ignorant of him, or assuredly designing some mischief to my government? And Pilate said, I did it because of the transgression and sedition of the lawless and ungodly Jews." What had happened here was that, in AD 64, during Emperor Nero's reign, there was a violent unrest and killings of Christians in Israel, especially in Jerusalem. After Caesar Nero died in AD 68, the new Caesar was confused by the rebellion and killings going on in Israel, so he summoned Pontius Pilate, who had witnessed everything, to explain what was going on. Pilate tried to defend himself by blaming the leadership of the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin for persuading him to kill Jesus, but Caesar got angry and called a council meeting with all his senators and ordered that a decree be issued against the Jews. The decree read as follows: To Licinus, who holdeth the first place in the East country. Greeting. I have been informed of the audacity perpetrated very recently by the Jews inhabiting Jerusalem and the cities round about, and their lawless doing, how they compelled Pilate to crucify a certain God called Jesus, through which great transgression of theirs the world was darkened and drawn into ruin. Determine therefore, with a body of soldiers, to go to them there at once and proclaim their subjection to bondage by this decree. By obeying and proceeding against them, and scattering them abroad in all nations, enslave them, and by driving their nation from all Judea as soon as possible show, wherever this hath not yet appeared, that they are full of evil. And when this decree came into the east country, Licinus obeyed, through fear of the decree, and laid waste all the nation of the Jews, and caused those that were left in Judea to go into slavery with them that were scattered among the Gentiles, that it might be known by Caesar that these things had been done by Licinus against the Jews in the east country, and to please him. According to historical records, in 70 AD, as Caesar had directed, the Roman soldiers attacked Jerusalem and its neighboring towns and burnt down the second Jewish temple. Daniel prophecy regarding the temple stated that, the end will come like a flood. As the flood destroys everything in its path, so did the fire that destroyed the second holy temple. It burnt the temple to the ground with no trace. This is a present-day picture of the location where the second temple once stood, and as can be seen, there is no trace of the temple in Jerusalem. As prophesied, after the second Jewish temple was destroyed, and both bloodline Jews and Edomite Jews were driven from the promised land of Israel to Africa. Jews arrived in Africa. The destruction of the Jewish temple and the scattering of Jews abroad is just one aspect of the 400-year slavery punishment. It's important to understand that the clock for the 400-year punishment did not begin to tick in the year that the Jews were expelled from the promised land of Israel. The Jews fled to Africa to avoid death from the Roman soldiers. According to the Bible, the Israelites have always fled to Africa to avoid death. We see these examples with Abraham and Sarah, Jacob and his sons and Joseph, Mary and baby Jesus. The Jews fled through the Mediterranean Sea and settled in Africa. Some Jews settled in North Africa, while others settled in Western and Central Africa. Historical sources confirmed that the Jews that fled to North Africa are known as the Maghrebi Jews. The term Maghrebi Jews are referred to the modern people of Morocco, Algeria and Tunisia. Wikipedia Encyclopedia stated that, the Maghrebi Jews or North African Jews are native Jews who had traditionally lived in the Maghreb region of North Africa, Al-Maghreb, Arabic for the West, under Arab rule during the Middle Ages. The established Jewish communities had existed in North Africa long before the arrival of Sephardic Jews, expelled from Portugal and Spain. The Jews lived in multiple communities in North Africa for over 2,000 years, with the oldest Jewish communities were present during Roman times and possibly as early as within Punic colonies of the ancient Carthage period. Maghrebi Jews largely mixed with the newly arrived Sephardic Jews, beginning from the 13th century until the 16th century, eventually being overwhelmed by Sephardim and embracing the Sephardic Jewish identity in most cases. Source: Wikipedia, Encyclopedia. According to historical sources, we confirm the following. Some Jews arrived in Morocco, Algeria and Tunisia in North Africa. The Jews arrived in Africa during the reign of the Roman Empire. The Jews arrived in North Africa over 2,000 years ago. Between the 13th and 16th centuries, some Jews arrived from Spain and Portugal to North Africa. The questions that beg for answers would be the following. Which Jews settled in North Africa? The Edomites, the descendants of Esau, are the modern people of Morocco, Tunisia and Algeria. How come North African Jews have lighter skin color? Genesis recorded that the first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment, so they named him Esau. Genesis 25:25. I have a special topic for Esau, but I will do a quick review about his skin color. Rebekah had two sons, Esau and Jacob, and the Bible described Esau's skin color as red, not the present traditional red color, but as in light skin color. Esau and his descendants, the Edomites, who are now the modern nations of Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria, have light skin color. As previously said, Israelites and Jews had brown skin, so the Jews who settled in West and Central Africa have brown skin. Are the descendants of Esau connected to the 400-year punishment? No, the descendants of Esau, the Edomites, are not involved or linked to the 400 years slavery punishment. Historical records stated that the Jews lived in multiple communities in North Africa for over 2,000 years, with the oldest Jewish communities were present during Roman times. I haven't seen any official or historical records indicating when the bloodline, the brown-skinned Jews arrived in West Africa, but it makes perfect sense to use the date that the Edomites Jews arrived in North Africa because they were both expelled from Israel at the same time. It is very reasonable to believe that the bloodline, brown-skinned Jews arrived in West and Central Africa between 70 and 75 AD. The countries of West and Central Africa are Mauritania, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Togo, Benin Republic, Nigeria, Niger Republic, Chad, Cameroon, Guinea, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Congo Republic, Angola, Sao Tome and Principe, Congo Republic, Congo and Madagascar. The Jews fled from Israel across the Mediterranean Sea and settled on the coastal areas of West and Central Africa. The Jews crossed the Mediterranean Sea from Israel to Africa. Not all the West African countries are Jewish, but prophecies and historical sources will help us determine who the lost Jews are. The Jews arrived in Nigeria. We begin by identifying the Jews that arrived in one of West Africa's coastal areas, today known as Nigeria. When the Jews arrived, Nigeria did not exist, but it wasn't a completely empty land. Some people had already occupied some parts of Nigeria before the Jews arrived, and they were known as the Noks. According to historical records, the Nok civilization appeared in Nigeria around 1500 BC and vanished under unknown circumstances around 500 AD, having lasted approximately 2,000 years. The major sites of Nok villages are Jamar, now known as Kaduna, Samanjukia, unknown, Taruga, unknown. The Nok culture is a population whose material remains is named after the Ham village of Nok in Kaduna state of Nigeria. Historical source: Wikipedia, Encyclopedia. We learn the following about the Noks. The Noks are Hamitic people, the descendants of Ham, the third son of Noah. The Noks occupied northern Nigeria since 1500 BC, before Jesus was born. The Noks culture vanished around 500 AD. The Noks are the modern people of Kaduna State, Plateau State and Abuja. Benue, Kogi, and Kwara states are not Hamitic people. Their inclusion in the north-central region of Nigeria is solely for political and geographical reasons. If the Noks only occupied northern Nigeria, it meant that the entire southern and western regions of Nigeria were free and empty for the brown-skinned Jews to occupy. Based on how southern Nigerians structured themselves, it is possible that the Jews arrived on Nigeria's southern seashore. The seashore stretches from Lagos State to Cross River State. The Jews which arrived in Nigeria were from the tribes of Levi and Judah. The Jews separated themselves into two groups based on their tribes, spread inwardly into the land and settled there. The Jews settled in the areas now known as western and southern Nigeria, which share a common border with Edo and Delta states. The nation of Judah is a combined tribes of Judah, Levi and Benjamin. The tribe of Judah settled in the entire southeast, south-south, including Benue state, and stretched to Cameroon. The tribe of Levi settled in the entire southwestern Nigeria, including Edo, Kogi, Kwara state, and stretched to modern nations of Benin Republic, Togo, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Sierra Leone, Senegal, Gambia and the New Guinea. The tribes of Benjamin settled in Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, São Tomé and Príncipe, Madagascar, Republic of Congo, Angola and parts of South Africa. The nation of Judah in Africa. Looking at the 1747 English maps created by cartographer Emmanuel Bowen, we see the red arrow pointing to a circled area on the map that is labeled as Slave Coast, and the black arrow pointing to a phrase KM of Judah. KM is an abbreviation for kingdom. It's interesting that the cartographer Emmanuel Bowen described the Slave Coast as the Kingdom of Judah. The modern nations of Togo, Benin Republic and the entire southern Nigeria were formerly known as Slave Coast. The inscription on the map states Kingdom of Judah, as in Nation of Judah. Why would cartographer Emmanuel Bowen label the region as the Kingdom of Judah? Cartographer Emmanuel Bowen did not make a mistake in labeling the region as the Kingdom of Judah. He was a highly educated and intelligent man in his trade, and he knew exactly what he was doing when he accurately identified nations on West Africa's coastline as the Kingdom of Judah. Before we can identify the Jews who arrived in Nigeria, it's important to understand how they fulfilled biblical prophecies. The prophecies stated that the Lord will bring a nation against you from far away, from the ends of the earth, like an eagle swooping down, a nation whose language you will not understand, a fierce-looking nation without respect for the old or pity for the young. Deuteronomy 28, 49-50. Just as it pleased the Lord to make you prosper and increase in number, so it will please him to ruin and destroy you. You will be uprooted from the land you are entering to possess, never to see the land again. Deuteronomy 28, 63. The Lord will send you back in ships to Egypt on a journey I said you should never make again. There you will offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you. Deuteronomy 28, 68. Which sends envoys by the sea in papyrus boats over the water. Go, swift messengers, to a people tall and smooth-skinned, to a people feared far and wide, an aggressive nation of strange speech, whose land is divided by rivers. Isaiah 18, 2. Prophet Isaiah also prophesied about the enslavement of the Jews. Deuteronomy 28, 49 stated that a nation from far away, and whose language the Jews will not understand, will enslave them. This prophecy also stated that both the Israelites and the Jews would never see their homeland, the Promised Land, again. Throughout history, slavery has been practiced in various parts of the world. Some notable ones are the Roman slave trade, Arab slave trade, African slave trade and the transatlantic slave trade. Which slave trade was mentioned in Bible prophecies? How can we tell which slave trade the prophecies were referring to? Any group of people claiming to be Jews must meet the following criteria. The group of people must have been driven from their homeland, Israel. The nation that will enslave the group of people would come from far away. The group of people will not understand the language of the nation that will enslave them. The group of people would be captured and carried by papyrus boats across the Atlantic Ocean. As a result of the disobedience to God, the group of people would be sentenced to 400 years of slavery. The group of people would be referred to by a byword. The group of people would be bound with yokes of iron. The group of people will be offered up for sale. The group of people would have formerly lived in Egypt, and they will return there. Any group of people claiming to be the Jews must fit into these prophetic profiles. The transatlantic slave trade and punishment sentence. The nation that will enslave the Jews must have the following characteristics. The nation would be symbolized by the eagle. The nation would come from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. The nation would cross the sea with papyrus boats. The nation would be targeting a nation scattered and peeled. The United States of America is the only country that has crossed the river of Ethiopia with ships. It's identified with the eagle and has attacked a peeled and defenseless people in West Africa and taken them as slaves. The conditions of the slavery. The prophecies stated that, therefore in hunger and thirst, in nakedness and dire poverty, you will serve the enemies the Lord sends against you. He will put an iron yoke on your neck until he has destroyed you. Deuteronomy 28:48. If the Jews disobeyed God, they would suffer the ultimate punishment of a horrible enslavement conditions. The severe conditions of enslavement would also serve as a sign to identify the true Jewish people. There are various slave trade events throughout the world, but we are only interested in the slave trade that is 100% in line with the Bible prophecies. Only the transatlantic slave trade perfectly fulfills the 400 years punishment prophecies. The punishment for the disobedience of Jews would be severe hunger and thirst, in nakedness, dire poverty and iron yoke on their neck. The prophecy stated that, the Lord will bring a nation against you from far away, from the ends of the earth. The prophecy also stated that, and will come over you like an eagle swooping down. Most of the time, God uses animal behaviors to describe the behaviors of an individual or a nation in order to provide clearer understanding. In this case, God used the eagle's characteristics to describe America's conduct or behavior. God used the craftiness, fierceness and swiftness of an eagle to describe the aggressiveness and cruelty of America. If we understand the eagle's cunning and speed in hunting its prey, we could guess how ruthless America was when it invaded West Africa and captured the Jews. The prophecy stated that, a fierce-looking nation without respect for the old or pity for the young. It's natural for the Jews to resist arrest and fight back, but the Americans would conquer them because of their superior weapons, like guns. Millions of Jews, including old men and young children, were captured and carried away as slaves to the Americas. The prophecy states that, he will put an iron yoke on your neck. The reference to, yoke of iron on your neck, refers to the iron chains put on the necks of the Jews to prevent them from escaping. The prophecy stated that, therefore in hunger and thirst, in nakedness and dire poverty, you will serve the enemies. The prophecy also stated that, in the morning you will say, if only it were evening. And in the evening, if only it were morning. Because of the terror that will fill your hearts and the sights that your eyes will see, what could be worse than these living conditions? The Jews suffered a great deal of suppression and very harsh living condition. The Jews served their slave masters in nakedness and extreme poverty. The Jews worked in sugar cane and fruits plantations. The Jews were forced to wear iron face masks, yoke of iron, to prevent them from eating from the plantations. The prophecy stated that, there you will offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you. The Jews were put on sale like pieces of commodities and sold to the highest bidder. There were times when Jews offered themselves to be sold by another slave master due to the terrible living conditions provided by the previous slave master. The prophecy stated that, "A nation whose language you will not understand." The Jews were forced to abandon the Hebrew language and learn the native languages of their captors, languages like English, Portuguese, Latin, French, Spanish, etc. We will talk more about Hebrew language later. The prophecy stated that, "Woe to the land of whirring wings along the rivers of Cush, which sends envoys by sea in papyrus boats over the water." The prophecy stated that, "The nation that will enslave the Jews will cross the river of Cush." The modern country and name for Cush is Ethiopia. The Atlantic Ocean was formerly known as the Ethiopian Ocean. The prophecy stated that, "The nation that will enslave the Jews would send envoys in papyrus boats over the water." Envoy means ambassadors or diplomats. Papyrus boats are big ships used to carry huge quantities of cargoes. American envoys arrived in Africa on ships designed to transport Jews into slavery. The Jews were carried away in ships as slaves. The prophecy stated that, "The Lord will send you back in ships to Egypt on a journey I said you should never make again." How and when was this prophecy fulfilled? Before we talk about the fulfillment of this prophecy, we must first identify who the modern Egyptians are. This prophecy has dual fulfillment. The reference to Egypt in this prophecy does not literally refer to the physical land of Egypt. It implies that the Jews will be scattered among the Egyptians, and Egyptian culture and values will be present in the countries to which the Jews are shipped as slaves. The people we refer to as Hauses and Fulanis in northern Nigeria and nations such as Chad, Niger Republic, Sudan and South Sudan are ancient Egyptians and Libyans. Modern Egyptians and Libyans are not the bloodline or ancient Egyptians and Libyans. The ancient Egyptians and Libyans migrated from the native countries and scattered among West African nations due to oppression of the Roman Empire. Egyptians and Libyans descended from Ham, and Hamitic people have dark brown skin color. Historical records and pictorial evidence proved that the ancient Egyptians and Libyans were dark brown skin people. In modern time, it's difficult to differentiate the Egyptians from the Libyans because of their similarities in body features, skin color, cultures, religions, and they have commingled for over 1,000 years. Because of time, I will focus on the people that migrated from ancient Egypt alone. According to historical records, the Hausa people or tribe are an ethnic group that lives in Nigeria and Niger. It is believed that the Hausa are indigenous to the Saharan desert. Between 500 to 700 CE, the Hausa migrated from what used to be Nubia, northern Sudan, to Niger. Wikipedia history. We learn the following from the above historical records. The Hausa tribe live in Nigerian and Niger Republic. The Hausa tribe were the native or original people of the Saharan desert. Northern Sudan was formerly ancient Nubians. The Hausa tribe migrated from northern Sudan, the ancient Nubia, to Niger Republic between 500 to 700 CE. If the Hausa tribe migrated from the now northern Sudan, formerly known as the ancient Nubians, where did the Nubians originate or migrate from? According to historical records, the Nubians are a Nilo-Saharan-speaking ethnic group indigenous to the region which is now northern Sudan and southern Egypt. They originate from the early inhabitants of the central Nile Valley, believed to be one of the earliest cradles of civilization. Wikipedia history. Here, we are informed that the Nubians originated or migrated from the central Nile Valley. Where is the Nile Valley located today? Using Google Earth Map to locate where Nile Valley is located today, we see that the Nile Valley is in Egypt where the Nubians lived before they migrated to West Africa. Why did the ancient Egyptians migrate from Egypt to other regions in Africa? Cleopatra was a female and the last pharaoh of Egypt. In 30 BC, Roman Emperor Gaius Octavia, later known as Augustus, officially started ruling Egypt after he defeated his fellow countryman and Cleopatra's lover, Mark Antony. After Octavia conquered Egypt, the Roman soldiers occupied and lived in most part of Egypt, especially in Alexandria. We see the same pattern of settlement when the Roman soldiers ruled Jerusalem during the days of Jesus on earth. Matthew chapter 4 stated that, in the land of Zebulun and of Naphtali, beside the sea, beyond the Jordan River, in Galilee where so many Gentiles live. Matthew 4:15-16. As we already know that the Europeans and Asians are the Gentiles, and the Bible informed us that the Gentiles, the Roman soldiers, settled in Galilee. History recorded the following about Egypt after the invasion of the Roman soldiers. It stated that Alexandria had become the largest city in the world and for some centuries more, was second only to Rome. It became Egypt's main Greek city, with Greek people from diverse backgrounds. The Roman Empire ruled Egypt from 30 BC to AD 641. That's 671 years. The Romans and the Greeks settled in most part of Egypt, and this explains why we see white people as modern Egyptians. The Romans, the Greek and other Europeans remained in Egypt after the dethronement of the Romans by the Arabs. Just as the Roman soldiers did to the Jews when they captured Jerusalem, they imposed heavy taxes on the Egyptians and introduced taxes in kind, that is, foodstuffs, provided for the maintenance of the Roman soldiers stationed in Egypt. Due to these mistreatments, the native black Egyptians gradually migrated from their homeland to Sudan in East Africa. The Egyptians continued their migration westwards, from Sudan to Chad, Niger Republic and later to Nigeria. Furthermore, we see that the houses still identifies with their ancient Egyptian cultures today. One such culture is cow rearing. Cow in ancient Egypt was among the most important domestic animals. A few goddesses were portrayed as sacred cows or bulls. The cow was connected to the goddess of female fertility. The houses rear and adore the cow because it was part of their ancient Egyptian heritage. The houses and the Fulani people had migrated already to northern Nigeria by the time the Jews arrived in southern Nigeria in 70 AD and have been living together since then till today. The language spoken by the Hausa people is another important piece of evidence that confirms their ancient Egyptian ancestry. Wikipedia history stated that the Hausa language, a Chadic language, originated within the Chadic branch of the Afro-Asiatic language family, with its speakers, the Hausa people, primarily found in northern Nigeria and southern Niger. The Hausa language originated from ancient Egypt, from the Afro-Asiatic family language which is related to the Chadic languages. What does the Chadic language mean? Wikipedia history stated that Chadic languages are a branch of the Afroasiatic language family, primarily spoken in parts of the Sahel region of Africa. They are most found in Niger, Nigeria, Chad, and Cameroon. Where did the Chadic languages originate from? Wikipedia history stated that Chadic languages are linked to ancient Egyptian through the common ancestry in the Afroasiatic language family. Both are considered branches of this large family, which also includes Semitic, Berber, Cushitic, and Omotic languages. While the relationship between Chadic and ancient Egyptian is more distant compared to languages like Semitic and Berber. Here, we learn that the Chadic language, which is spoken by the Hauses, originated from the ancient Egyptian language. The prophecy stated that the Lord will send you back in ships to Egypt on a journey I said you should never make again. Apart from the prophecy implying that the Jews would live among the Egyptians and adopting their values and cultures, this prophecy also implied that the mistreatments and injustices suffered by the ancient Israelites at the hands of the ancient Egyptians during the days of Moses would be repeated in the era of the modern Jews that will live with the modern Egyptians, now known as the Hausa Fulanis. The injustices that the Hausa Fulani-led governments are currently causing to the Jews of Judah and Levi, which are the people of the entire southern Nigeria, including Benue, Kogi, and Kwara states, are in fulfillment of this prophecy. The injustice of one-sided political and ministerial appointments, the menace of Boko Haram, the killing and displacement of Jews and their children, the rape of their wives and daughters, and the destruction of their houses, farms, and crops by Fulani herders are all in fulfillments of the prophecy. The second part of the fulfillment of this prophecy means that the Egyptian values would be represented in the country where the Jews will be carried to as slaves. The two iconic or symbols of ancient Egypt are the obelisk pillar and the Great Pyramid. The obelisk pillar was built by the ancient Egyptian people to honor the dead kings. The Egyptian government gave one obelisk pillar as a gift to the United States in 1879. The obelisk pillar is currently displayed in Central Park in New York, America. The Pyramid of Giza was where the pharaohs of Egypt are buried. In 1935, America adopted the image of the Great Pyramid and used it as the symbol on the American $1 bill. Jews conquered and transported abroad as slaves. The prophecy stated that Jews will be transported across the Atlantic Ocean, and the following countries were affected by the transatlantic slave trade. The map showed that Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Benin Republic, Ivory Coast, Liberia, Togo, Ghana, Cameroon, Gabon, Congo Republic, Equatorial Guinea, southern Nigeria, Angola, Madagascar, São Tomé and Príncipe and coastal part of South Africa are all Jewish nations. It was estimated that over 12.5 million Jews were captured from these countries and were shipped to the Americas as slaves. Over 2 million Jews died either of illness or suicide by jumping into the Atlantic Ocean. The historical records made by Americans themselves provided the most compelling evidence supporting the claim that the transatlantic slaves are the lost Jews of the Bible. Though the transatlantic slave trade began in the early 16th century, the names of Jews captured and taken from West Africa were not officially recorded until 200 years later, in the early 18th century. The Americans began to record the personal details of the Jews, such as their names, ages, genders, heights, location, and years of capture and transported to the Americas. The data of Jews that suffered from the transatlantic slave trade was stored on slaveavoyage.org is an America-based organization website that stored all recorded data of the transatlantic slaves that were brought to the Americas from the 18th century. I decided to download the names from the website so that I could study them, and I discovered the following. American transatlantic slave trade data page contains over 2 million names recorded from the 18th century. The names below are from the Lagos, a Yoruba region. The slave names are 99.9% Hebrew names. Take a minute to check carefully to see if you could find modern Yoruba names. Names from the Yoruba region continues. We notice that there are no modern Yoruba names such as Akin or Adi or Olu here. Names from the Yoruba region continues. Names from Badagry region. Names from Badagry region continue. Names from Boni from Southeast and South-South region. We notice that there are no common names like Chuku or modern Igbo names. From the country of origin section, we see the Jews from Boni region were recorded as Ibu, Hebo. These words originated from the Hebrew. Names from Boni, Southeast and South-South region continues. Names from Cameroon. Names from Cameroon continues. Why would all 18 countries that were hypothetically native Africans and descendants of Ham have Hebrew names? These nations have the same names because they are from the same root, the same bloodline. When you read through the full list of names, you will observe that all the nations had the same trail of names. If this is true, how did the names and languages of these nations change to what they are today? We would discuss about the change in Hebrew names and language later. Another interesting thing about the names is that we could see Arabic names on the list. We see the names highlighted in yellow such as Ali, Muhammad, Mohammadu, and Musa etc. Arabic names are not synonymous to the Hebrew people. Why did transatlantic slave trade files include Arabic names? The prophecy stated that, "The Lord will drive you and the king you set over you to a nation unknown to you or your ancestors." Deuteronomy 28:6. I will elaborate more on this prophecy later in the study. It's important to point out that not everyone in Western Nigeria is Jewish. Odudwa and his bloodline descendants are not Jews, they are Oduas or Yoruba people. Odudwa and his bloodline descendants are descendants of Canaan, the fourth son of Ham. The Canaanites were the original owners of the land of Canaan, now known as Israel. Because of their sins, God drove the Canaanites from the promised land and scattered them among the neighboring nations which are in the area now known as the Arabian Peninsula. Odudwa and his father settled in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, until they were driven from there to western Nigeria. The Americans captured Jews from the tribe of Levi, as well as the Yoruba descendants of Odudwa, who had lived with the Jews for at least 500 years, and they were both carried to the Americas slave, as prophesied. If you go through the list, you will see ancient Hebrew and Israelites names such as Esau, Tamar, Jesse, Jonah, Esther, Mary, Martha, Adar, Anna, Levi, Judah, Moses etc. A few Fulani and Hausa names were also recorded as slaves carried to the Americas. The captured Fulani and Hausa people were just victims of circumstances. This does not make them Jewish. We can see that the man who arrested the Jews was working with the Americans, and he was dressed in traditional Fulani attire, just like they do today. Alauda Equiano was captured in southern Nigeria by African slave merchants in the 17th century, sold as a slave, and carried abroad. I will talk more about his adventures later in the study. He described his adventurous life as a slave in his book, titled, The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Alauda Equiano. Olodua described how he was forced to travel by foot through many African countries before he was sold and sent to America. In this book, Alauda revealed important facts about the languages and traditions of the villages he and his captor traveled to. Alauda wrote that, although it was a great many days' journey from my father's house, yet these people spoke exactly the same language with us. All the nations and people I had hitherto passed through resembled our own in their manners, customs, and language. The language of these people resembled ours so nearly, that we understood each other perfectly. They had also the very same customs as we. While I was in this astonishment, one of my fellow prisoners spoke to a countryman of his about the horses, who said they were the same kind they had in their country. I understood them, though they were from a distant part of Africa. Alauda also wrote that, from the time I left my own nation I always found somebody that understood me till I came to the seacoast. The languages of different nations did not totally differ, nor were they so copious as those of the Europeans, particularly the English. The similarity of the Hebrew names on slavevoyages.org in various African countries confirms Alauda's stories about the Jews in Africa. Because they all have the same root, it makes perfect sense that these African countries spoke Hebrew and have the same names. The Zondervan controversy. Another strong evidence that proves that the Israelites and the Jews are brown-skinned people was the Zondervan controversy. Zondervan is an international Christian publishing company in America. In 1963, the company printed the New International Version, NIV, commentary Bible stating that the Negroes are descendants of Shem and not of Ham. The beautiful thing about the mountains of evidence that support the facts that the Israelites and Jews are brown-skinned people is that all the sources were retrieved from the records or the archives of the Caucasian, the white people, which